People have a lot of questions about alimony. And one of the things you need to understand is that there is permanent alimony, which is until you die, remarry, or cohabitate. And then there's permanent periodic alimony, which is for a time certain. And then there's also alimony in gross. Alimony in gross is amount that cannot be modified. So it doesn't matter if you remarry or cohabitate, you're going to get that same amount of money. The factors that influence alimony are how long you've been married. That's really important because Alabama has a law that you cannot get alimony for longer than you've been married, except in the case of permanent alimony. If you've been married over 20 years, then you can get alimony for life, but that doesn't mean you're going to. The other factors that are involved are your age. If you're young, if you're healthy, if you're educated, the chances are going to be less that you're going to get alimony. Then we look at the standard of living that you had. Even if you might make a good earning, you might not make as much that you can live in the same manner that you lived when you were married. So that's something the court's going to consider. And then it's going to be important to talk about fault. Now, if there is egregious faults in a marriage, then alimony is going to be considered more than if it's your fault. If the divorce is because you've been having an affair or you've been the one that's committing the malfeasance, then alimony might be less likely. Sometimes people come in and they want to modify the alimony. Most of the time, it's because you're the payor and now you're retiring. If that's the case, yes, you can ask the court to modify the alimony. If something has happened to you where you're injured and you can't work anymore, or you have some deterioration of health in some other way, then you can ask the court to modify your alimony. Very rarely do I see someone going back and getting more alimony. I'm not saying it's not possible. That's certainly within the realm of the law, but it's not as likely. The factor of alimony really comes down to who your judge is, because there's times that the judge is just not going to give you alimony. Some judges are more likely, some judges are least likely. I would say that if you've been married a long time and there's clearly a higher earner in the marriage and you have a deficit in what you need to live on, then you should get alimony. But I can't promise you that because it's really going to come down to how the court feels about it. If you have an alimony case, then what's going to be really important is that you show that you have a deficit in your budget, which means you can't cover all of your bills with your salary. And when I talk about all your bills, I'm not talking about your gym or your manicure or your fashion expenses. I'm talking about what the court calls reasonable and necessary expenses. Now, all of those things can factor in if it's a long-term marriage and you've always lived that way. But what the court's really going to look for is this necessary for you to have a kind of life that you had before you were married? They're not going to give you a lot of extras. So if you want to put on your vacation or your gifts to your kids and your grandkids or your savings, those are not things that are going to be counted by the court when it comes to awarding alimony. So having a very clear budget is what you need. And where you can show, I don't have this much to live on, I need it, and this spouse has the money, then they can pay me. Those are very important factors. If you have any questions about alimony in Alabama, then please feel free to give us a call at Lee Daniel Associates. We'd be glad to walk you through the process.